All right. Happy Friday afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another MSP Cyber Roundtable. We're excited to have Richard Kranendonk joining us today. How did I do on the last name pronunciation?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah? Okay.
I'd say Kranendonk, but it's okay.
Oh, man.
Makes me sound international.
If I would have tried, I think I could probably do it, but I would have had to be really confident to try that off the cuff. How are you? Tell everybody where you're at and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I will. I'm calling in from Utrecht, which is in the Netherlands. It's about 40 kilometers below Amsterdam. We've got a nice historic center with some medieval buildings, and we've got canals, but it's much smaller, much quieter than Amsterdam, and it doesn't have stoned Italians and drunk Brits roaming the streets, so I prefer it.
What kind of Americans come through?
Only nice people.
Only good ones.
Only nice people.
He's so politic.
Yeah.
So I'm actually, I told you guys just before we started, I'm in an old factory building. They used to make food for cattle here. Now it's converted to office space. It's very nice. I studied psychology in Amsterdam a long time ago, and then I went into IT as a consultant, as a project manager, and since 2017 I've specialized in privacy and security, and I've shifted more and more to the management side of security and compliance, and that's where I am right now.
Matt and you are really going to enjoy getting into some more specifics there. Tell me about your career as a journey, and what was like the highlight? What's been the biggest challenge?
Those are difficult questions. Okay, so I started as an implementation consultant for ERP and CRM software, so trying to connect the business processes to the systems and vice versa. And after 7 years of doing that, I started out on my own and basically continued the kind of work I did. Did all for all kinds of companies, and at some time I was asked to manage a reorganization of a hospital. So I thought, yeah, sure, I can do that. So I did reorganizations for a couple of years, but I grew a bit tired of that, because it's like the beginning of a reorganization is great fun, because you can do some blue sky thinking, think about improvements, make everything better. But at the end, people are forced to leave. People are forced to do work they kind of didn't choose when they came aboard. And in the end, the only people who are very happy are from the financials department. And I thought, this is not about healthcare. This is not about creating a great environment for people. So I thought, how can I get back into IT, because I really enjoyed working. I'm not a technical person myself, but I really enjoy working between technology and the business. So I needed to find like a trick, because if you've been out of IT for 7 years, especially if you get a little bit older, it's hard to get back, you know. So then the GDPR came along. That was came into effect in May 2018. So in 2017, I started hearing about it, and I thought, this is my angle, because I think it's very important that citizens have control over the data that is about them. And also there's technical aspects, there's business aspects, so that kind of came together. And I started a cooperation with a specialized law firm here in the Netherlands, and we did some We helped a lot of clients to become GDPR compliant and to understand what it was all about. I like that very much, but there was like a discrepancy in energy, because for the lawyers it was like a kind of nice side business, and for me it was where I put all my energy in. So then, you know, that didn't work really well at the end. In the end, so then I did some interim jobs. I was a privacy and security manager for Ultimaker, a 3D printer company. I worked for Booking.com. I worked a year as an auditor, internal audits for different companies on the ISO 27001. And I kind of kept running into the same kind of problems, and we'll get back to that later. And that's how I came to developing the Canvas method for information security.
What? Let's take a slight detour into something less technical. You said you had some pizza today.
Yeah.
This might be less technical, but it might be highly charged. People think very highly of Italy for pizza. You're over there in the mix. Where in the EU has the best pizza?
Of course, Italy.
One.
By definition, it would be Italy. I don't know. I don't eat pizza that often, but when I do, I like a thin crust and a simple mix of toppings. Okay. I hope that's as far as I can go.
No, that's a beautiful question. Yeah. I think that's great. Matt, tell me about your week, man. We're excited to talk about
Well,
risk.
now I'm thinking about pizza, and I'm thinking about food culture in the Mediterranean. And you know what? I love when pizza is an appetizer. Here in the US, we're just like, we want to go deep in and eat the whole pie, right? And in the Mediterranean, it's like you've got a stopover in pizza land in like a lot of your meals, right? It's between the early food and the late food. And I think we should bring that home.
Anyway, I emphasize, you said deep with the pizza, and that's exactly my preference for pizza.
Okay.
I like deep and greasy.
Yeah. Someone in the chat has guessed the pizza I had. Pizza Napolitana.
Oh, really? Look at this.
Do we have prizes?
Does that gentleman know you, or are they just?
No, I don't think so. No.
Hilarious.
That's the exact pizza that he was talking about.
I think the prize is probably now he gets a NIST lecture.
Oh yeah. Okay. All right. Let's do it.
All right.
Here we go.
You're getting cheered on, man. They're ready they're hyped up for the lecture.
Yeah, so
dude, who gets more? There's not one more exciting. Now maybe Australia's Essential 8 with the 800.
I love Australia's Central 8, not to get lost down a hole here. Today is NIST special publication 800-53. Now before I go any further, NIST SP 800-53, not to be confused with about 10 other NIST standards that people oftentimes confuse with this one when they are talking about cybersecurity, because NIST has a whole slew of them. The 853 standard is deeply technical, it's detailed, it's comprehensive. It's what the federal government inside the US uses to secure itself. It's also widely used across state governments, and we're getting questions about what version of NIST 853. The current version we've got is version 5, but we're on version 5 since 2005. So every few years we have a new version. In fact, version 6 is on the horizon now. Inside the federal government, NIST 853 reporting is used to describe all the great security measures that agencies have. Also in state government, it's frequently used if you really want to dig towards high security standards, although state governments sometimes work on something a little less comprehensive like NIST CSF. Also, There's other security standards in the NIST family, like NIST 800-171, which is a federal contracting requirements list. And NIST 800-171 actually is not a security standard because it doesn't tell you how to do anything. It actually references NIST 853 among other standards. So, but what NIST 853 is really good at is, in a very, very detailed way, in a very comprehensive way, talking about all of the security requirements an organization might put in place, as well as how to assess them or measure them. And along with that, they've taken those, and I don't actually know the number of controls, and we don't have it here on the slide. I think it's close to 500 controls across these different control families. They've split them into a number of domains. This is pretty similar to
special publication. I know that was on the last slide.
I'm actually not sure why it's a special publication, because but it seems like the important NIST standards are all special publications, but I'm not really sure what the word special means.
It's like a holographic Pokemon card.
Us people in the security field treat them that way sometimes. But NIST has got all sorts of other publications that are sort of fly by night. The special publications live along for a while. They have versions, they have comment periods, and they're put together by huge groups of people. That's what happened here. So anyway, all the controls are grouped up into different security domain areas. They've each got controls and subcontrols. There's also this concept of baselines. Now, there are some other NIST 853 baselines, and I don't want to get lost in the details. But the three baselines that most people should understand are the low baseline, the low security baseline, the medium security baseline, and the high security baseline. These roughly correlate to the ways that the federal government treats the sensitivity of those systems or the data in those systems. So if you have a low sensitivity system with no critical data in it, it would be baselined on the low impact baseline. If you have a system with a bunch of top secret stuff in it, or it's critical, right? Like tax information, you'd have that up at the high impact side of the spectrum. In a high impact security system, it costs a lot of money. You've got to do hundreds of things, right? In a low impact system, maybe only a couple hundred rather than 400 or 500 things. So that's how these baselines work. Very, very similar to what CIS does with their implementation groups and some other standards.
Matthew, how do you determine what category your system is in?
That's a really good question. So if you're in the private sector, you have to go through a risk analysis exercise, and even to figure out how much risk do I have, what's my risk appetite, and then you can choose a baseline that makes sense. On the federal side of the house, oftentimes there's less discretion there, because what they look at is, well, if the impact is X, Y, or Z, you're definitely up at medium. If the impact is A, B, C, or X, Y, Z, then you're up at high. They might also say, well, your critical infrastructure, you're automatically high. So there are some heuristic rules there that are involved at the federal agencies, and in the private sector, we just have to figure it out ourselves. But the purpose of the baselines is that if you know your requirements are relatively low, it's a pre-cooked plan. If you know your requirements are really high, pre-cooked plan, right? We're not making it up as we go along, and that's the reason why they're pre-baseline. I think the only other thing I really want to cover here is just to distinguish NIST 853 from NIST CSF. Now, there's a lot of NIST standards out there, and when some people say NIST security, and they're not very specific, they really mean NIST CSF. Other times when they say NIST security, they really mean NIST 853. Sometimes they mean NIST 800-171, but I want to just distinguish these two. NIST CSF is a very simplified framework. It talks about the general tools or concepts you would use to secure your systems. It does not tell you exactly how to do it. It then refers out to technical standards that tell you exactly how to implement security. NIST CSF is a little bit like GPS for security. It helps you navigate all the different domains. It might help you translate your security to a standardized language. It is not going to define exactly how you should build cybersecurity. NIST 853 goes much deeper. I would say, in terms of the control depth, it's something like 3 times more comprehensive. And in addition to that, it's got very specific assessment requirements. Zach, go ahead.
I got 2 questions, so
Shoot.
get ready. Pow! I want to know more about assessment requirements. And then, so I understand NIST CSF and I understand how NIST 853 is more complex. You talk about CIS being very rooted in like the concrete. Is that similar to how NIST 853 is, and that it's very clear task-oriented things? Or could you kind of describe the difference for me around
that? First of all, there's almost 3 times as many NIST 853 controls as there are CIS controls.
Right,
so that's one thing. Each security concept is more detailed. Also, there's very, very few people or process things in CIS. So in CIS, the goal is to break attack chains, and not all attack chains, just most of them, and to do it as cheaply as possible. And so it's really focused on specific technical interventions you can do to break attack chains. And there's some people process stuff in there, but it's very simple people processes. NIST 853, NIST 853 is going to go much deeper into exactly what people should be doing, exactly how they should be trained, exactly how they should be measured.
I see. So when you say that NIST 853 is more prescriptive than NIST CSF, it's more direct on the actual behavior that needs to happen, but isn't necessarily more technical.
It's more detailed. It's more specific. You're right. And the reason why you would choose one or the other, right? NIST CSF is useful for navigating the security requirements. NIST 853 is more useful in achieving specific security requirements.
When would you want to navigate versus achieve?
Well, if you're just starting out in cybersecurity, you have no security formalization at all. NIST 853 can be quite challenging, even at that low baseline. It makes sense to use some kind of stepping stone there. NIST CSF is a great stepping stone. CIS is a great stepping stone. There are others. NIST 853 is super useful if you need to prove your system to a very specific level of security. So you can imagine large organizations, hyperscalers like AWS and Microsoft Azure, they need to prove exactly how secure their system is. And they need to prove that it's super repeatable, right? And provable. And so because of that, they need NIST 853. If you're going to prove something, you need to be specific about it. If you're just going to generally be making best efforts, you don't need to go that deep. So it's all about how deep do you want to go into cybersecurity.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the assessment stuff? Sorry, Richard. Sometimes we go deep.
Well, NIST 853 is, I will say, it has some things that many other standards do not have, which is it has specific assessment objectives. It tells you, not only does it tell you for each of the controls, for each of 400 some controls, it tells you exactly the steps you need to go through. Is this true? Is this false? Percentage this, right? Rate that, down to a quantified number-based method. How do you determine the exact level of security, right? And most security standards don't really give instructions on how to measure. It's up to the assessor to just sort of say, well, people are doing a little bit or a lot, or they're doing really good or they're not doing good. And that's how a lot of assessments look. If you want something very, very specific, you're going to have to use a quantified assessment framework. Right. And you're going to have to use it with a very specific control matrix. And Richard talked about another one that sort of fits in the same category here. ISO 27K, in some ways, is roughly comparable to NIST 853. They're at similar levels of depth and specificity.
Thank you for that detail. Beautiful.
We got a bunch of comments here. This is a super popular framework, apparently.
I think we've got a good question here from Clarissa, and I think Jens is adding some wonderful commentary.
So Clarissa asks, how do you explain risk to a C-suite executive that moves them to action? Actually, that is today's topic of the day. And I would say NIST 853 is the wrong tool for that. So we're going to circle back on that in just a minute. If someone is talking to your C-suites about NIST 853 controls, they're probably doing it wrong. Most security people have no interest in having that conversation. So the idea that non-security people would want to dig that deep is, it's gonna be difficult. Jens, thank you for all that information. For anyone that's listening or watching, head on over to LinkedIn. Jens has a number of resources that can be used for risk assessment, as well as choosing baselines. It's over on our LinkedIn event page.
Thanks, Jens.
I'm gonna wash away these slides unless you guys you want to dig.
No, let's do the thing. We could dive into. We could use Clarissa's question as a great segue here. We can start thinking about it.
So this is like this is like really the question. Like, before we even talk how to communicate risk to business clients, I think we should talk about why, right? Why explain risk to business clients? And Clarissa's got one of the reasons here that's humongously important, which is, well, maybe it'll drive them into action. And if you, as a security person, think that your client needs to take action and they're not taking action, communicating the risk is the only way to get them to do that, right? Or at least one of the best ways. What are the other reasons why we would even want to present risk to our business clients, if not to drive them to action? Richard, what are the other reasons we would even embark on this exercise?
There are a lot of reasons. For the business, primarily it would probably be that being not aware of risks might be very harmful to their business, to their continuity, to their reputation. They might even get fines or get into all kinds of lawsuits. So you can always try to scare them. And there's also, of course, the reasons for being accountable on how you deal with risks in your company, and accountability is getting much more attention the last couple of years or decades, because not only do businesses want to make money, but they, for various reasons, also want to display an accountable, sensible posture towards the people working for them, their clients, other stakeholders, the world around them. And not being attentive of risks in the right way will hurt that. So that would be a reason. Also, all kinds of how do you call that, organizations that oversee the businesses from outside, from a regulatory standpoint. They want to see these processes in action, so that might be reasons to do that. But I would advise anyone to be as specific as possible, not about controls, because business people are not interested in security controls, but where and how it will hurt them if they don't pay attention.
Yeah, I loved a bunch of what you said there. I think on that last point related to controls, and I like to come at it from a business perspective. The business owner wants to know what you're going to be able to do that's going to provide security at the lowest cost. So the only way they'd be specifically interested in the controls is if you're communicating in terms of like, hey, this set is your best tool for low cost security that's going to do X. And if I heard, that would be like in my old life, that would be like the sufficient amount of information I would need relationship to a control that would allow me to understand, oh, this person has clarity. I saw it brought up in the chat, budget. I think that's a really great point. And I also imagine my previous life being a part of a large corporation where you're vying for dollars for things to be done. And having really the ability to really clearly communicate that uh, the risk with stakeholders can allow for budget allocation that can be really important to actually solving the problem. If you don't communicate ahead of time, I need this for this, you could be trying to solve a problem without sufficient tools to do so, which can be tremendously challenging for an organization.
Yeah, and also you're trying to get budget for a problem that may not have materialized yet, because it's like you're trying to prevent stuff from happening. So it's, in reality, it's much easier to get budget when a company has recently felt the hurt of security problems. And if they have been comparatively unaware of bad things happening, you won't get budget, because you're trying to sell a kind of an abstract gizmo, a thing they don't understand anything about, to cover a risk which they've never experienced, and that's really hard to do.
Forgive me, but I love the idea of risk being something that a business owner or business leaders are extremely familiar with. A good business owner is able to identify risk efficiently and solve for it efficiently. Whether it be risk in human capital, and whatever the type of risk is going to be. I have annual turnover that I'm expecting, or I have grown double in size and I'm going to need new staff to take care of it, or whatever, labor risk. I've got this person that's a cancer in the team, and that's an issue. Or I've got physical risk of my storefront, or physical risk of whatever else. There's all these different types of risk that the business owners are already tuning into. So I like the idea of the conversation being based around risk.
And I think, to continue with your line of thought, the challenge is to have information security risks discussions on the same plane as you have financial risk, HR risk, people risk, etc. Because the reality I see around me is that the leadership, the CEO or the COO, they talk with the middle management, they talk about profit and loss, they talk about commercial opportunities, they talk about employee health, they talk about effectiveness of this or that. But as soon as it's about the flow of information and protecting the flow of information and the availability, it's suddenly the IT guy's problem, which is kind of really.
Matt, forgive me for dominating here, but I love to talk about this specifically because, in my eyes, sales is a value communication exercise. And what I mean by that is the seller has a perceived value of whatever it is that they're selling, and the buyer has a perception of the value of what it is that they're buying. And the seller has an amount of value they're willing to part for value that they're getting. And the one selling is trying to get on the same page of this is the value and this is worth this much because. So when you're going out in an internal situation and you're maybe trying to sell one of your leaders or one of your peers that's also a leader of the organization, that there's a risk here that needs solved. If they don't understand in depth what the F you're talking about, you can't communicate that value or that potential loss, because the general necessary knowledge there for the person to understand the loss or the potential value isn't sufficient. So if you're ever running into that, from my perspective, where your leaders are immediately tuning out when you start to talk about tech. It's because you're talking about the things that aren't actually vital to the risk equation. And I think that can lead people to tune out.
Yeah. When I try to communicate the impact of problems with information security, I ask questions like, how long could you do without this system? Or how long could you do without this data before you run into trouble? And that gives them a view on the hurt they might experience. And that's a good point to start talking about, looking at the risks involved about disrupting the availability of systems or information, or the disruption caused by data not being trustworthy, or the damage they will have reputations-wise when a data leak comes into the public eye. So that's I think that's a better way to discuss security than talk about all the terrific controls and technology stuff you got.
We talk about risk, right, to understand someone's tolerance to risk, right, and that so that they understand their tolerance, right, because they need to understand how much risk they have and how much risk they want. And I have this popcorn slide I want to throw up because I
have some bad experiences with popcorn and throw up.
Well, let me put it up. So this is after the risk after you do the risk assessment, right? You get to have the conversation about popcorn, which is, I love this slide. I'm just going to throw it up there for a second. If buying security was like buying popcorn, after someone understands their risk, they would look at their risk that they have right now. They would look at the risk that they want to have, right? And they would say, I'm this hungry for security, right? And that's the point you want to get them to understand their own hungry in ways that we never do when we go into the movie theater. And even when I get the small popcorn, I realize after I ate it, actually that made me feel gross. I shouldn't have eaten that. But we we all go up to the snack bar and we say, I want this much popcorn, right? And I think
I'm a big security kind of guy in the movie theater.
You can never have enough security.
There's so much salt on my security too.
But even getting people to that point of choosing the right amount of popcorn is hard, right? Like how do they even know how much security they want if they don't know how much security they have and they don't know what they need to get to that level of risk that's acceptable, right? And so you, as the security advisor or the risk advisor, right, you need to sit there with the customer and you need to say, well, this is how hungry you are right now, right? Or describe to me how hungry you are based on, here's your options. And but getting there's hard, right? Because security is complicated. People's businesses are complicated, and ultimately you do have to relate it back to dollars. So Richard, I I got so excited when your name appeared on my calendar a few months ago, and I started looking at your website, and I was like, "There's a canvas for this," and I was just mind blown because I love workshopping on canvases. I love the lean canvas, and for anyone that doesn't know what that is, it's I mean there's drill down workshops that you can do, but the lean canvas is a one pager business plan. Okay, it's where your organization is and trying to get to, and your whole plan on one page, which sounds basically impossible until you go through the exercise and you realize, oh, that is possible to put it all on one page.
Yeah, that's the business model canvas I think you're referring to.
Yeah, or the mission model canvas if you're in the nonprofit or government space. Yep.
Yeah.
And so when I saw what you created, I was like, oh man, how did I not create this like 5 years ago or whatever? And I got super excited. I don't know if anyone else is going to be excited, but you've done a few canvases now. So before we dive into Canvas Land, how did you get from this space of people need risk accepts and they need to communicate this stuff to let's try to get it on a page? Like, because I know that sounds simple, but I didn't get there.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people go through really complicated processes to arrive at something that their business customers don't even understand. So
Well, the reason is pure frustration.
Yeah.
So
that's how all good problems are solved.
that's where innovation comes from.
Yeah,
Tell us more.
Yeah, well, working as an auditor or an ISO 27K implementer, or as a data protection officer or a security manager or a compliance officer, the trouble you run into is how do you get the business involved? From an IT standpoint, we still talk about IT versus the business, so that's kind of where we are. How do we get them involved? Because we can get budget, and then we build like the wall around the castle. We make it better so bad stuff doesn't get in and the good stuff doesn't get out, and then we have a safe perimeter, we hope. But there's still lots of stuff happening inside the organization. And why is that? I've got some slides on that. Maybe now is a good time
I want to pull it
up.
up, but I want to talk about this space for 1 second more. So
Yeah.
people do tabletops right now for this purpose, and
Yeah.
it's basically best practice in our industry. But the thing that frustrates me about a tabletop as a professional is it's hard to get people in the room. You can attract them
Yeah.
with pizza, maybe.
Mhm.
You get
And
me if it's pizza.
it is as soon as the pizza's over, they want to bolt, right?
Yeah.
And then they forget about the whole great tabletop they just went through.
As soon as the
So-
pizza's over with me,
Yeah.
you can do
Yeah, and
whatever
then
you need to do.
their brains shut off, and then
Yeah.
so in any case, I'm just thinking I wanted to contrast what you have here, because it acts differently than a tabletop, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a leave behind.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna bring up is this the right slide, or do you want me to go
Yeah,
someplace else first?
this is good. This is good. No, maybe cycle back to, or just
Yeah,
behind
sure.
the logo further. So because I'm going to.
We could go all the way back.
Yeah. Okay. Next one. Next
Yeah,
one.
okay.
That one. Okay.
I love that logo,
so,
by the way.
Either you agree with this or you think I'm nuts. So shadow IT, and by shadow IT we mean that users and teams, they all start to devise their own tools with spreadsheets and software as a service, and the CISO doesn't approve of this, so that's shadow IT. It's an expression of creativity and agility by people who need to get their work done in a constantly changing environment. So why is this? Because sometimes it seems that security people and IT people think that anyone else in the business is just bonkers. They just start doing stupid things for no reason but to make the company more insecure. But the reality is the environment and what's asked of people in the business is constantly changing, and the official systems they get provided with, the official toolbox, just doesn't change fast enough for them to get their work done. So they get creative, they start finding all kinds of solutions to deliver results. And that's creativity, that's what makes a company agile, and killing shadow IT would mean that that the business would actually, I believe that businesses without shadow IT are in danger of for their business continuity.
Well,
I just wish they picked a better name.
Well, here's the thing about that name, Zach. It started more than 20 years ago, at a time when it was basically a bad word in the IT industry. And I think I and Richard and many other people came to embrace exactly this definition when we realized, hey, Salesforce is great. It's better than that thing we had before, and I don't need to worry about it anymore. And it was a bit of a conversion moment for the IT guy to realize, oh, users really can just engage and create their own IT solutions. And our job is just to become ambassadors and support for that value. But more recently, Richard, I've progressed past this to say I now think the term shadow IT needs to be banished, because I think if the people in the business are not using IT to express creatively with agility, if they're not doing that, with all of their IT, as an organization, with all of your IT infrastructure and applications and business logic, if you're not creative and agile, right, you don't have an edge, right?
No.
And
No.
so I think it is IT. It's no longer shadow IT. This is the way this model basically won, I think.
Yeah.
That's-
But there's of course there's a danger there we should be aware of, because it exists. But it's generally used with a low awareness of the risks it introduces for the aspects of information security, and also these risks are not visible to the CISO. So it's kind of a shadow land. So yeah, shadow still. And it's very easy for employees to introduce vulnerabilities in their business processes. So here's a fact: 80% of information security incidents are caused by human actions. You can find this in lots of surveys. It's always around 80%. So why is that? Let me give you some examples before I get into this one. I'm going to do one example because of the time. This is my favorite example of people trying to find solutions and creating enormous risks without being aware of it. It's a hospital. I was at a hospital where I did a process scan of the operating rooms. So I start there on my first day, and the secretary of the operating rooms approaches me very friendly. She says, "If you need to know anything, just come to me," she said, like in a secretive tone, "because I've got this little black book here and it's got all the passwords of all the surgeons." I say, "Hey, great, that's easy. Why do you have that?" "Well," she tells me, "the systems in the operating rooms take forever to start up. And the surgeons can't wait for that. So what I do is I arrive half an hour before the first operation. I log every computer I log in, so that when the surgeons arrive, they're fully operational." Now, this is, of course, a very dangerous thing, but it gets even worse, because how does this work? There are like 12 operating rooms, and at any time, 11 are occupied, and the 12th one is being cleaned. And once the room is cleaned, the teams rotate. But they don't log out and log in again. So there was no relation anymore between the medical things that happened there and the people who performed them. So you can imagine what kind of risk you're introducing, not only to information security, but also to actual people and their lives.
Well, and just to be clear, Richard, I can't speak for the Netherlands, but here in the US, that's illegal.
Yeah. It's probably very illegal. That's why I don't mention the name of the client, but this is what happens. Yeah, this is stuff that actually happens. So 80% of incidents are caused by human actions. The majority of, and that's just, I don't know, I'm actually making a bold statement here because I don't actually know, but from my experience, most budget goes to technological measures. Now, why is that? Thanks for several reasons. A typical CISO is more comfortable with IT. It's comparatively easy for a CISO to get budget approval for technology because information security is an IT problem, right?
Well, and I'm sure the business leaders think, I pay this person to be an expert in technology, not an expert in people and process.
Yeah, right. And it's hard to run behavioral change programs because you need time and effort from the business.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. So next slide.
I'm just so engaged, I forgot that we had slides.
That's cool. Business is not committed to security or privacy. It's only word of mouth, mostly. There's no leading by example. Examples like the CEO that keep using a personal device and mailbox. That discussion, the data protection officer always loses. I see a compliance risk in the new marketing database with its algorithms, and then the marketing officer says, yeah, but it gives us 10,000 qualified leads every month. Then we know who wins the discussion. And also business management, and I think that is a core problem, business management is not held accountable for their responsibility with regards to information security. It's not on the discussion, for team performance, for for management performance, how they deal with information security risks that happen within their business unit. And that's something that really needs to change if we want to tackle these enormous risks that are inherent in business processes themselves. So these are the challenges we face. How can we get visibility on risks inherent in day-to-day business processes? How can we get employees to behave sensibly without limiting their creativity? How can we actively involve the business in identifying and managing these risks? And how can we create insights on information security for business management? And that's how I developed these 3 canvases and 1 maturity board to work with business teams and to work with management teams to help them with that. So if we can get to the first canvas, that's the yellow one. Oh yeah, the slide before that is also very interesting for me. It's not just 1 canvas, it's a cycle. So what we want is a plan, do, check, act cycle to occur in business teams with regards to information security. So there's 3 workshops that form a cycle. The first one is about risks. The second one is about controls. The third one is about evaluating the performance of your controls and talking about incidents and root causes. And between that, there's a meeting to align risks and controls between different teams in the company and also with frameworks that need to be respected. So if you look at the first slide, the first canvas, this follows the ISO 27K principles of how to deal with risks. So you look at the context of a team, stakeholders, regulations, things happening in the organization like big changes, new technology, things happen in the world around them that might influence the risk. Then we look at the process itself. So where does the information come from? Where does your information go to? And what tooling do you need, do you use to do that? And then we start talking about risk. So this is with business teams. This can be an HR team, this can be a service desk, customer support, whatever. And we say, and we talk with them about, so what kind of risks do you see happening in the process yourself, in your own processes? And it usually happens on boundaries. So if I need to transfer information to another part of the company or to somewhere outside the company, that's where mismatches occur, and that's where people need to be creative, and that's where risks arise. Because if nothing changes, everything is fixed, you can tune your information systems and you have a stable situation, but that's not reality. So then now we have risks, and now we start talking about what to do with the risks. If the team thinks they can do something themselves about it, we put it in mitigate. If they think it's an important risk to tackle, but we need help from outside to do this, from the IT department, from a vendor, management needs to make a decision, it goes to transfer. If they think the risk is acceptable, it goes there. And if they think they can change their ways or stop doing certain activities, we put it in avoid. So now we have risks, and the team has a proposal on how to deal with this risk. And then next week, I come back with the next canvas. That's the green one. So, yeah. So for the risks, the team has identified as something they can mitigate themselves. We start talking about actions or controls that they can put into place to tackle these risks. And we also talk about how can we know if this performs well. We need some form of measurement. It may be logs, it may be counting stuff, it may be whatever. And also when they think we've mitigated the risk enough to call it a success for this cycle. So now we also have proposals for actual measures. And I see a question. Most departments do not understand the risks to begin with. How do you address that? Well, this method is not so much about being 100% complete or 100% correct. It's about engaging people in a continuous and structured dialogue about risks and how to handle risks. So, of course, the role of the facilitator is important, but because he or she needs to help the team with examples, with certain kinds of questions to get them thinking about risk. Because once you get across a certain threshold and they understand it and they start, my experience is they come with enough risks to fill a session, and lots more mostly. So
I would love to
yeah.
add something to that really quickly, Richard. I think so. I get to spend a lot of time teaching folks and communicating ideas. And in my career to this point, I've had a lot of time training. And I think that Richard, you hit the nail on the head when you said ask them questions. Ask them questions. And if I could take that one step further, I'll explain why that's valuable. Jens, if you're struggling to get people to understand the risk that they own, asking them questions in a way that forces them to problem solve is what highlights the actual information in their mind. So asking questions forces them to go through that internal problem solving mechanism. And they may not know the answers, and they may, in their problem solving, ask you some questions related to the situation. But if you just try to tell them, it's like you're speaking another language to them. So you have to have them tell you so you can figure out, oh, this is where they don't understand, or this is where they understand, or this is where they are misinformed, and so forth.
The goal here, right, isn't to get them to understand every risk that exists. There is a security
No, but just in
professional job
relationship
there.
to this question, is the question specifically.
Right. They don't need to, because all they need to know is how hungry are they, right? Like how much risk is out there? Okay, it looks like a lot. Therefore, you get budget. Therefore, we take action. I'll let the professionals figure out how to actually enact the action. But me as the business owner, I'm now bought in. I see it, right? Because they have risk thinking now, right?
Yeah. They learn that they have a responsibility in this security challenges.
Yeah.
It's not something someone else will solve for them. That someone else will solve part of the problem because there's a IT security department which knows everything about cryptographic keys and configuring firewalls and whatever. That's not their problem. They should learn that they are introducing risks in their work and that they have responsibility there. And then again, that there is no wrong answer in these kinds of sessions.
Richard,
Sometimes, yeah.
I don't want to brag to you too hard, but
No.
I have configured one firewall.
You did, actually.
I seem to recall an entire lab with many pieces in it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, maybe I configured a couple firewalls.
So
I thought you'd get a kick out of that.
Yeah, totally. Let's move to the next one because I see we're running out of time. This one usually I get back 3 months later because they need time to implement all kinds of controls. This is not a project management method. This is about risk management. So I get back after 3 months and I say, okay, did we have any incidents in the last period? What were the root causes? The controls you implemented, how effective have they been in lowering the risks? And what improvements do we need to have going into the next cycle? So then we got the full cycle, the risk landscape is changed. And we actually have everything like, not as detailed, of course, but if an auditor comes into your company, he wants to see proof of that you're doing a PDCA cycle, that you're doing risk management, and it's actually there with these canvases. Because you can involve everyone in the organization in this way, and they actually learn how to deal with risks, and also that they are, I'm getting quite emotional here, but because that they are heard in this. You know, with like hearing someone listens to them about this and has a sensible conversation, and that really works to involve them into the whole problem.
Well, being heard in a business environment is extremely important because it's what allows understanding and change to ultimately happen. So
Yeah,
these supporting in that is important.
yeah. This is the last one. This is this shows the maturity of your risk management. So we've got the goals and the goals for your information security and the most important controls, and then you can note if there is a policy drafted, if it's been implemented, if it's been monitored, evaluated, and if improvements have been identified for the next session. So typically, a company will move to from low maturity to high maturity if you do this a couple of cycles. So this is also a great way to make the company ready for a successful implementation of any risk-oriented framework.
Now, Richard, we haven't mentioned thus far, but these are freely available, right?
Yes, it's
Is this
published.
the is this
No,
the
that's
right
cool.
information here?
Yeah, that's it. You can download it from there. It's published under Creative Commons, which means you can use it for your own purposes. You can adapt it for your own purposes as long
Very
as
cool.
you refer to me and my company as the original creator.
That's
Do we want to
generous.
keep? We got a couple more slides here. Do you want to keep going?
Yeah, sure. This is what I use before the first session when I'm starting with the team to explain to them that information security is not a state or a project we will do once and then we're secure, but that's they're working in a continuously changing environment. So the triangle at the core, the blue triangle, is the holy trinity of confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. We need to, I need to explain that a little bit to them because confidentiality, especially since GDPR, everybody knows about that, but that's just as available to know you can trust the data and that it's available when you need it. On the outside of the circle, you see all kinds of stuff which influences their work and which might cause risks for the data they're working with. And then the little orange balls, they show the cycle, the management cycle of identifying risks, selecting treatments, implementing them, and then looking how they perform and to adapt and improve on the controls. And going through that process continuously will make your company safer with each cycle. It's like a detergent. It's like a washing machine.
Well, Richard, I'm super excited to try out these canvases. I can't wait for an excuse to try them myself. And of course, if organizations think they need support, do you have like when should they call you, Richard? When should they go beyond just downloading the canvas and say I'm ready for some support?
Okay. What I want to do with my company is facilitate workshops within organizations or train people to become practitioners with this method. So basically I have two types of clients. I have clients that have enough resources and enough people, larger organizations that say, I want you to train some people within my company to make this happen internally. Smaller companies usually say, well, we would really like that, but we know how it goes. We'll just as soon have someone come into our company every half year and take us through the cycle because we know it's not going to happen otherwise. So that's when I or we like to step in when people need help to use this method or run it for them.
All right. I
And
love
if
it.
you start working with that, Matthew, I'd love to support you in that and accompany you.
Yeah,
I,
that sounds fun.
I think there are lots of good things that we could do together. Matt, what do you have in terms of takeaways for today?
Well, this isn't new today, but when Richard was talking about it, it sparked a little. I need to tell everyone. So, the risk management methods that you say are based in ISO 27K, and yeah, some of that terminology is a little bit different when you're looking at other frameworks. This is universal theory, right?
Yeah.
Basically everyone in information security in the world agrees that this is how it's supposed to be done, right? So, getting it down onto a page, this is like the simplest version of it, which is what you really need when you're doing it for the first time, or even when you're doing it for the second time or third time, I would say. So I think that even if you think that ISO 27K is maybe not something that applies to you, or is maybe not the right security lighthouse, this assessment methodology is universal.
Yeah, and it can also, I've actually worked with a food company, a food safety company, because it's the same like in food safety. It's not, you also have to recognize risks and act upon them and see how that performs. And but it's important to engage people in conversation, to activate them, and not just provide them with the risk of to-dos from your GRC system without context, without meaning to them, because then it won't happen.
Agree. We agree with that. We completely agree with that. My takeaway, Richard, is from your story about yourself. You noted how you didn't like having a job that just did not help people at all. And I thought that was admirable, and I like to live my life that way as well. So I noted that when you were talking, and I didn't get a chance to come back to it, so I'm using this moment to do so.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming on. This was really great. Thank you to all of our guests and our wonderful commenters that engaged. Next week, Matt and I and our chief tech, our chief, what do we call Danny, Matt?
Usually say chief engineer. He's got a few hats.
Engineer. We've got chief engineer Danny joining us for the first time we're ever doing a what's happening in cybersecurity. We're going to start doing a quarterly about the latest things that have happened. So that's going to be interesting next week. We're looking forward to it. And Richard, this was a blast, man. We look forward to doing more fun things with you.
Cool. I'd like to.
Thanks everybody so much, and have a great weekend. Bye everybody.